Some stories don't begin with a grand decision or a moment of courage. Some begin with a trembling thumb hovering over a phone screen at 2 in the morning, a baby crying in the next room, and a woman so exhausted by surviving that she stopped checking the details. This is one of those stories. And by the time it ends, you'll understand why the smallest mistakes sometimes carry the biggest destinies. The power had been off since Tuesday. Sophia Reyes had stopped counting the hours somewhere around midnight, when the candle on the kitchen counter burned low enough to make shadows out of everything. She sat on the cold linoleum floor with her back against the refrigerator that hadn't hummed in 2 days, her knees pulled to her chest, her 3-month-old son wrapped against her in a cotton sling that had seen better days. Mateo wasn't crying anymore. That was almost worse. He'd cried for 40 minutes straight before exhaustion pulled him under, his tiny fists uncurling against her collarbone, his breathing still hitching in that broken little rhythm that only mothers recognize, the rhythm that said, "I needed something and I didn't get it." The formula canister on the counter was empty. She'd stretched the last scoop across 2 feedings, watering it down just enough to fill him halfway, telling herself it was fine, that he'd be okay, that Friday was only 2 days away, and her paycheck would clear, and she'd fix everything then. But it was Wednesday, at 2 a.m., and Mateo's belly was half empty, and Sophia Reyes was sitting on a kitchen floor in the dark, feeling like the worst mother in the world. She picked up her phone. The screen light felt violent in the darkness. She scrolled to her brother Danny's contact. Danny, who had helped her twice before without complaint, but whose wife had started sighing loudly in the background during their last call. Danny, who had his own kids and his own bills and his own life that Sophia was slowly becoming an inconvenience to. She typed fast, the way you do when shame is pushing the words out before courage can stop them. Danny, I hate asking again. I need $40 for formula. Mateo's out. I get paid Friday, and I'll pay you back the same day, I promise. I'm sorry. She hit send before she could rewrite it a 4th time. She set the phone face down on the floor, pulled the sling tighter around Mateo, and pressed her lips to the top of his head. He smelled like baby shampoo and something sweeter underneath. Something she had no word for, except mine. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped it. The message was short, 4 words and a question mark. I think you have the wrong number. Sophia stared at it. Then she looked at the contact name at the top of the thread and felt the floor drop out from under her. The number was 1 digit off from Danny's. 1 single digit. She'd called this number before, she realized. Or rather, she'd almost called it. Catching the mistake in time. Tonight? With no lights and shaking hands and a heart too heavy to be careful, she hadn't caught it. She had just sent her most humiliating message to a complete stranger. I'm so sorry, she typed immediately, her face burning even in the dark. Wrong number. Please ignore that. She locked the screen, dropped her head back against the refrigerator, added this to the growing list of things that had gone wrong this month, this year, this version of her life that looked nothing like the one she'd planned. Mateo stirred against her chest. She shooshed him softly, rubbing small circles on his back. Her phone buzzed again. She assumed it was an auto-reply, a delivery notification, anything except what it actually was. Is the baby okay? 3 miles away on the 32nd floor of a building that most people in this city only ever saw from the outside, Hyun-jae Lim was still awake. This was not unusual. Sleep had become a negotiation for him somewhere in the last 2 years, something he bartered with rather than surrendered to. He would give it 3 hours here, 4 hours there, and in exchange it would leave him alone during the parts of the night when his mind was loudest. He was reviewing acquisition documents when the text came through on his private line. Almost no one had this number. His assistant, his lawyer, his younger sister in Seoul, who called every Sunday at a time that was inconvenient for both of them, but that neither of them would ever change. And now, apparently, a stranger. He read the message twice. Danny, I hate asking again. I need $40 for formula. Mateo's out. I get paid Friday, and I'll pay you back the same day, I promise. I'm sorry. He set the document down. He was not a sentimental man. He had learned early that sentiment was a luxury, the kind that countries and companies and people could only afford after they'd secured everything else. He had spent the better part of his 38 years securing everything else. But there was something in that message that bypassed every carefully constructed wall he'd built. Maybe it was the word again. The acknowledgement that this wasn't the first time, that she knew it, that she was sorry for it before anyone had even responded. Maybe it was the specificity of $40. Not $100, not vague, $40. The exact price of one canister of formula. The kind of number you know by heart when it's the difference between feeding your child and not. He sent his reply and waited. When she said wrong number, please ignore, he almost did. Almost. Is the baby okay? He typed instead. He wasn't sure why. He told himself it was simply a reasonable question. A human reflex. Nothing more. Sophia read the message 3 times before she believed it was real. A stranger asking if her baby was okay. Not annoyed. Not reporting her number as spam. Just asking. He will be? She typed carefully. I'll figure it out. Sorry again for bothering you. The reply came quickly. You didn't bother me. My name is Jay. What do you need? Sophia almost laughed. Almost. I'm not taking money from a stranger, she typed. Smart. But I didn't offer money. I asked what you need. She stared at the screen. Something about the precision of that response unsettled her. Most people would have either ignored her or made a vague gesture of sympathy. This person had drawn a very specific line between what she assumed and what he'd actually said. Formula, she typed, before she could stop herself. The kind for sensitive stomachs. He's 3 months old. Brand? Enfamil Gentilese. But seriously, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. Give me your address. Sophia put the phone down. She picked it up. She put it down again. Mateo made a small sound against her chest, somewhere between a sigh and a complaint, and she looked down at his face, scrunched even in sleep, already so full of opinions, and made a decision that she would spend the next several weeks questioning. She typed her address. Then she added, if this is some kind of trick, I want you to know. I will find out who you are. The reply came back in seconds. That's fair. You should always know who you're dealing with. My name is Hyun-jae Lim. You can look me up. She did. And the kitchen floor felt very small suddenly, and the candle felt very dim, and Sophia Reyes sat in the dark holding her son, while her search results told her she had accidentally texted one of the 12 wealthiest people in South Korea. a man whose company, Lim Biocor, had just completed a $2.3 billion acquisition that was still trending in financial news. The man who had asked if her baby was okay. She sat with that information for a long time. Then she typed, "Why do you have an American number?" "I live here. Have for 6 years." "Why does that matter?" "I'm trying to figure out if you're real." A pause. Then, "I'm real. Go to sleep." Formula arrives at 6 a.m. She didn't sleep, but somewhere around 4 a.m., Mateo did, finally, fully, his little body gone, heavy and warm against her. And Sophia sat in the dying candlelight and stared at her phone and tried to understand what kind of world she had just stumbled into. If this story is already pulling at something in you, tap like right now. It helps more people find stories like this one. And ask yourself, would you have given him your address? At 6:02 a.m., someone knocked on her door. Not a stranger. A delivery driver in a green uniform holding 2 large bags and a clipboard. She signed for them with hands that hadn't quite steadied overnight. Inside the bags, 4 canisters of Enfamil Gentlies, 2 packs of newborn diapers, a soft blanket in pale yellow, and a small card, the kind that comes with flower deliveries, plain white with neat handwriting that looked like someone who had learned to write in a different alphabet first. He should have what he needs. J. Sophia read it 3 times. Then she sat down on the couch and cried in the specific way that has nothing to do with sadness. The way that happens when you've been holding something so heavy for so long that the moment someone else acknowledges the weight, your body doesn't know what to do with the relief. Mateo, freshly fed and legitimately full for the first time in days, watched her from his bouncer with the serious expression of a baby who has many thoughts and limited vocabulary. She picked up her phone. "The delivery came," she typed. "This was too much. I need to pay you back." His response took a few minutes. She imagined him in some vast, pristine office, surrounded by people who needed things from him, pausing to answer a message from a woman he'd never met. "You don't owe me anything, but if it helps you feel better, tell me your name." "Sophia. Sophia. Get some sleep. You sound exhausted, even through a text." She almost smiled. That might be the most accurate thing anyone said to me in months. She didn't text him again for 4 days. She told herself it was because she had nothing to say. She told herself it was because men who sent $200 worth of baby supplies to strangers at 6 a.m. were either dangerous or delusional, and she had enough complications. She told herself she was protecting herself, protecting Mateo, protecting the fragile stability she was slowly rebuilding from the wreckage of the last year. She told herself a lot of things while she picked up her phone 17 times a day and put it back down. On the 5th day, she texted him. "The yellow blanket is his favorite. I thought you should know." The reply came in under a minute. "He has good taste." She laughed. Out loud, alone in her apartment, for the first time in she couldn't remember how long. What followed was something she had no framework for. They texted the way people do when they're curious about each other, but careful, in short exchanges that lasted 10 minutes and then went quiet for hours. He asked about Mateo with a specificity that surprised her, remembering details she'd mentioned in passing, asking follow-up questions. She asked about his work And he answered without the performative modesty she'd expected from someone with his profile. He talked about Lim Biocore the way she used to talk about her lab work, like it was something he thought about, even when he wasn't thinking about it. She'd had her own career once. A good one. "What do you do?" he asked one evening, with Mateo asleep on her chest and a half-eaten bowl of ramen going cold beside her. "Right now, survive," she typed. Then, immediately, before that, pharmaceutical research, drug interaction analysis mostly. I have a master's in pharmacology. The pause before his response was longer than usual. "Why did you stop?" She looked at Mateo, at the rise and fall of his chest, at the way his mouth moved slightly in sleep, practicing sounds for a world he hadn't fully arrived in yet. "I didn't stop. Life interrupted." "What would you go back to if you could?" It was such a simple question. She hadn't let herself answer it in months, because the answer felt like cruelty, like standing outside a window of something you couldn't reach. Research, clinical trials, analysis. I was good at it. "I know," he replied. She frowned at the screen. "What do you mean you know?" "I looked you up too." Sophia set the phone down and felt something complicated move through her chest, the vulnerability of being researched, of someone looking at the professional version of her, the published papers, the university profile that was 2 years out of date, the conference she'd spoken at before everything changed, and forming an opinion. "And?" she typed finally. "And I think you're wasting a master's degree on survival mode," which I understand, but I wanted you to know I see it. She didn't know what to say to that. No one had said anything like it to her since Mateo's father had decided that fatherhood was a concept he preferred in theory. "You don't know me," she typed. "Not yet," he replied. 2 weeks later, he asked if she would meet him for coffee. She said no. He asked again 4 days later. Differently. "Not coffee, but a conversation. Wherever you're comfortable. Mateo is welcome." She said she'd think about it. She thought about it for 3 days, during which she asked her friend, Camille, approximately 47 questions about whether this was insane, whether she was being naive, whether the fact that he was a billionaire made it better or worse, and whether the yellow blanket detail was genuinely sweet or a calculated move. Camille, who had known Sophia since college and had excellent judgment about most things, said, "You've been talking to this man every day for 2 weeks, and you haven't asked him for a single thing. That's not how gold diggers operate, Sophia. That's how lonely people find each other." Sophia went to meet him. The cafe he suggested was not what she expected. Not the kind of place that had a sommelier or a dress code. It was a quiet, Korean-owned spot 3 blocks from her apartment, the kind with mismatched chairs and good light and a menu board written in both languages. The kind of place you only know about if you live in the neighborhood. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees and a look of someone who had been composed for so long that composure had become indistinguishable from his actual expression. In person, Hyun Jae Lim was not what his photographs suggested. The photographs showed a man built for boardrooms, sharp, contained, carefully positioned. The man in the cafe was all of that, yes, but also tired in a specific way that Sophia recognized because she wore the same tiredness. The cane that came not from overwork, but from carrying something private and heavy for too long. He stood when she walked in. She hadn't expected that. Sophia. He said her name like he'd been practicing the pronunciation, which she doubted, but which she appreciated. Jay, she said, because Hyun-jae felt too intimate for a first meeting, and he'd already told her what his American colleagues called him. Mateo, strapped to her chest and wide awake, stared at Jay with the unfiltered intensity that babies reserve for new faces. Jay looked back at him with an expression Sophia couldn't immediately name, not the performative cooing that most people defaulted to, something quieter, more honest. He looks like you, Jay said. Everyone says that like it's a surprise, Sophia replied. His father is not in the picture. She hadn't planned to say that. It came out flat and factual, the way she'd trained herself to deliver it so people wouldn't offer her pity she didn't want. Jay simply nodded. No performance of sympathy. No. I'm sorry that would have required her to say it's fine back. Just acknowledgement. And then, the coffee here is good. They use a Jeju blend. I found it by accident 2 years ago. She sat down. She wrapped her hands around the cup. And for the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, Sophia Reyes felt not fixed, not rescued, not saved, but seen, sitting across from a stranger who had looked her up and still shown up, who talked to her like someone worth talking to. It was terrifying. It was also, quietly, the best she'd felt in years. I need you to stay with me here, because what happens next changes everything, and I mean that. Don't go anywhere. 3 weeks after their first coffee, Jay called her. Not texted. Called. She almost didn't answer because her instinct was still to assume bad news arrived by phone. I want to offer you something, he said. His voice on the phone was lower than she'd expected, slightly accented in a way that his texts never revealed. And I want to be clear before I do that this comes with no conditions and no expectations. Sophia's grip tightened on the phone. Go ahead. Lim Biocore is expanding its clinical research division in the U.S. We need a senior analyst for drug interaction trials, someone with a pharmacology background and the ability to see patterns in data that other people miss. A pause. I've read your published work, Sophia. You see things other people miss. The room went very quiet. You're offering me a job. I'm telling you, a position exists and that you're qualified for it. Whether you apply is entirely your decision. The hiring process is standard. There's a committee, an interview panel. It won't be me making the final call. But you'd be my boss. Technically, the head of research would be your direct manager. I own the company. That's different. Is it? Another pause. I understand why you're skeptical. Do you? She didn't say it unkindly, just honestly. Because from where I'm sitting, a billionaire I met by accident is now offering me a career, and I can't tell if that's the most generous thing anyone's ever done for me, or the beginning of something I can't see the end of. Both can be true, he said quietly. She sat with that for a long moment. Tell me something about yourself, she said. Something that's not on your Wikipedia page. He was quiet long enough that she thought she'd pushed too far. Then, I had a daughter. She was born too early. We lost her when she was 11 days old. His voice was steady, but the steadiness was the kind that required effort. Her name was Seo-yeon. That was 4 years ago. Her mother and I didn't survive it as a couple. I threw myself into building the research division after that. funding neonatal studies, premature birth interventions. A breath. When your text came through that night, I wasn't looking for a reason to care about a stranger, but I found one anyway. Sophia pressed her hand to her mouth. She thought about Mateo, asleep in the next room, about 11 days, about what it would mean to have 11 days and then nothing, about a man who had channeled that grief into research that might save other babies, other mothers, and then one night received an accidental text from someone who needed $40 for formula. "Co Yan," she said softly. "Yes. I'm so sorry, Jay. Thank you." A pause. "Think about the position. No pressure. Whatever you decide." She thought about it for exactly 2 days. Then she sent in her application. She got the job. Not because of Jay, or not only because of Jay. The interview panel, a group of 4 researchers who clearly had no idea about the circumstances that had brought her to their door, grilled her for 90 minutes on methodology, data interpretation, and case studies from her published work. She answered every question with the fluency of someone who had never actually stopped thinking about this field, even during the years she'd spent thinking about nothing except survival. When the offer letter came, it had a salary that made her sit very still for a very long time. Starting 2 weeks from Monday, full benefits, an on-site childcare facility. She called Camille, and they both cried in the inelegant way of people who are genuinely happy, which is to say loudly and without dignity. She texted Jay a single line, "I got it." He replied, "I know. Congratulations, Dr. Reyes." She hadn't been called that in over a year. The first month at LimbBioCore was the professional equivalent of someone turning the lights back on in a room you'd forgotten was dark. Sophia arrived early every day. Mateo dropped at the on-site nursery where a woman named Ms. Park greeted him with the particular enthusiasm reserved for very small people with very large personalities. She settled at her desk, opened the trial datasets, and felt her brain engage with a click she'd been missing, like a phantom limb. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. The data patterns that made her colleagues squint and cross-reference and eventually shrug came to her with an almost physical clarity. Deviation points that pulsed like signals, inconsistencies that tugged at the edge of her attention until she followed them. It was this quality, the same one that had made her an excellent researcher, that first made her notice something was wrong. It started in the 6th week. She was reviewing quarterly expenditure reports as part of a compliance cross-check, routine, low stakes, the kind of task assigned to new analysts to orient them to the company's financial architecture. She wasn't looking for anything specific, but something found her anyway. A vendor, listed under research procurement, appearing across 3 separate department budgets under slightly different formatting: Core Med Supplies, K Med Supplies LLC, Core Med S. But sharing an identical tax identification number, the payments were small individually. Careful. Always just beneath the internal review threshold. Sophia pulled up 6 months of procurement records and spent an evening cross-referencing with a focus that made her forget to eat. By 11 p.m., she had a folder of flagged transactions totaling just over $340,000 across 2 fiscal quarters, all routing to the same vendor ID, a vendor that, When she searched the state business registry, returned an address that was a mailbox rental facility in New Jersey, and a registration date of 14 months ago. 14 months ago. 3 months after a new head of finance had joined Lim Biocor's U.S. operations. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she opened a new message to Jay. I need to show you something. It's not about the trial data. His reply came immediately, even though it was nearly midnight. My office. Tomorrow morning. First thing. She didn't sleep much. She kept reviewing the records, not because she doubted what she'd found, but because she needed to be certain. Certainty was non-negotiable. She was about to walk into a billionaire's office and tell him someone inside his company was stealing from him, and she would not do that on a foundation of almost. By 3 a.m., she was certain. By 5 a.m., she had a printed report with every transaction flagged, cross-referenced, and annotated. At 8 a.m., she walked into Jay's office and put it on his desk. He read through it without speaking. She watched his face the way she watched data, looking for the signal beneath the surface. What she found surprised her. There was no shock. There was recognition. The specific expression of someone seeing confirmed what they had suspected but hadn't been able to prove. How long? She asked. He looked up. How long have I suspected something? Since the second quarter of last year? Every time I flagged it internally, it got smoothed over. The numbers were always just clean enough. Who oversees procurement approvals? Jay set the report down. Richard Yoon, head of U.S. Finance. Sophia had met Richard Yoon exactly once, in a hallway introduction during her first week. Mid-50s, impeccably dressed, the easy confidence of someone who had never once been questioned in a professional setting. He's been here 7 years, Jay said quietly. The vendor was registered 14 months ago, Sophia replied. Whatever changed, something changed 14 months ago. Jay was quiet for a long moment. Then, I need you to keep digging. Carefully. No one else knows about this. Not my assistant, not legal, not HR. If Yoon has allies in this building and he gets wind that someone's looking, the trail disappears overnight. And when I find enough, then we move. But we move right. He met her eyes. I've been waiting for someone I could trust with this. I didn't expect it to be the woman who texted me by accident at 2 a.m. Sophia almost smiled. Funny how that works. Okay. I need you to stop for 1 second. Remember that text message she almost deleted? The one she sent to the wrong number? It's about to matter more than she ever imagined. Keep watching. What followed were 3 weeks that Sophia would later describe to Camille as simultaneously the most stressful and most focused of her professional life. She worked the investigation the way she worked a clinical trial, methodically, patiently, building the evidentiary structure from the foundation up. She traced the vendor payments through 4 layers of internal accounting, finding where each thread connected. She identified the ghost approval signatures, real employee login credentials used at irregular hours, always from the same device ID, always on evenings when Richard Yoon worked but late. She found the offshore routing. A holding company in the Cayman Islands, Corey Capital Partners, that received consolidated transfers every 45 days. She found the paper trail connecting Core Capital to a second company, then a third. Each one a legal shell nested inside another like a set of Matryoshka dolls. And then she found the internal email that broke it open. It was buried in a procurement archive from 13 months ago. A message from Yoon's account to a personal email address discussing the operational timeline for the new procurement channel. The language was careful, deliberately vague, but when cross-referenced with the first vendor registration date, the first payment, and the device ID logs, it was unambiguous. Richard Yoon hadn't just been stealing from Lim Biocore. He had designed the system to steal, built it deliberately, carefully, over months, with the patience of someone who believed he was smarter than everyone around him. Sophia printed the email, added it to the folder, and messaged Jay. "I have everything. It's enough." She wasn't prepared for what came next. The morning Jay scheduled the meeting with Yoon, described to Yoon as a routine financial review, Sophia monitored the conference room feed from her office. Mateo was in the nursery. Ms. Park had given him a new set of stacking rings, and he was, apparently, very serious about them. She watched Yoon walk into the conference room with the unhurried ease of a man who had never once been caught. He sat across from Jay with the relaxed posture of someone who believed this meeting was routine. She watched Jay lay out the evidence. She watched the moment Yoon understood. It happened in his eyes first. A flicker, quickly controlled, the recalibration of a man switching from confidence to strategy in real time. What Yoon said next made Sophia's blood run cold. "You can't prove intent," Yoon said smoothly. "These are accounting irregularities. My team will have an explanation by end of week. But if you want to pursue this, Jay, I'd encourage you to think carefully about what else comes to light during an investigation. There are questions about the Seoul acquisition, questions about how certain research contracts were awarded, that I'm sure the board would find very interesting." It was a threat, delivered beautifully, calmly, in the register of a man who had prepared contingencies. Sophia leaned forward in her chair. Jay's response was quiet. "Those questions have answers, Richard. All of them. But yours don't." He opened a second folder, one Sophia hadn't seen before. He slid it across the table. "Core Capital Partners," Jay said, "registered to your brother-in-law's address in Vancouver. I've had a forensic accounting firm working this for 3 weeks on a separate track." Sophia found the internal evidence. They found the external structure. Together, it's comprehensive. Yoon looked at the folder. He looked at Jay. And for the first time, the ease left his face entirely. "The state attorney's office receives the full package tomorrow morning," Jay said, "unless you'd like to tell me right now exactly how much and exactly where it went." The next 72 hours moved fast and slow simultaneously. Yoon, faced with the complete evidentiary picture, consulted a lawyer and provided a full accounting. The total amount siphoned over 14 months, $1.2 million. The lawyer negotiated a cooperation agreement. By Thursday morning, Richard Yoon had submitted his resignation, and federal investigators had been briefed. The Lim Biocore press release was careful and precise. Financial irregularities identified through internal audit. Full cooperation with authorities. Independent oversight committee established. It didn't mention Sophia by name. Jay had asked her before the release went out whether she wanted any public acknowledgement. She had said no without hesitation. "I didn't do this for credit," she told him. "I did it because it was right." He had looked at her for a long moment when she said that. The way people look at something they didn't expect to be as valuable as it turns out to be. 2 weeks after the investigation closed, Sophia got a call she hadn't expected. It was from the lead forensic accountant Jay had hired for the external track, a woman named Dr. Elaine Cho, who had apparently followed Sophia's internal documentation with something close to professional admiration. "I've been doing this for 19 years," Dr. Cho said. "The way you structured the evidentiary chain, the vendor ID cross-referencing, the device mapping, it's the kind of methodology we teach in forensic certification courses. Where did you learn it?" "Yeah, clinical trial data analysis," Sophia said. "Fraud and data error look the same in the early stages. You have to learn to tell them apart." "Have you ever considered forensic financial analysis as a specialization?" Sophia looked at Mateo, who was attempting to feed his stuffed rabbit a piece of his own rice cracker with a focus that suggested he considered this extremely important. "I'm starting to," she said. On a Friday evening, 6 weeks after the investigation concluded, Jay knocked on the open door of her office. She had stayed late again. She did this often, not from obligation, but because the work had that quality again, the absorbing, purpose-filled quality she'd mourned during the year of survival mode. Jay had started appearing in her doorway on Friday evenings with the low-key regularity of someone who had a reason to be there and was taking his time acknowledging what the reason actually was. "You should go home," he said. "You're always saying that," she replied, without looking up. "You're always still here." She saved her file and pushed back from her desk. Mateo had gone home hours ago with the evening nursery coordinator, delivered to Sophia's neighbor Camille, who had declared herself his honorary aunt with the confidence of someone who had not been asked but who was clearly correct. "Walk with me?" Jay asked. They walked the long way out of the building, through the lobby and onto the street where the city was doing its Friday evening exhale, louder, lighter, the week releasing its grip. They walked without destination for a while, the way they'd started to do, conversation moving between easy and honest, in a rhythm that had taken weeks to find and now felt natural. "I want to tell you something," Jay said, eventually. Sophia glanced at him. The evening light caught the tiredness in his face and also something else. Something that had been slowly replacing the tiredness over the past weeks. She didn't have a name for it yet, but she recognized it. She was wearing the same thing. Seo Yan would have been 4 years old next month, he said. He wasn't looking at her. Looking at the middle distance, the way people do when they're saying something they've said privately many times and are saying out loud for the first time. "For 3 years, I built things in her name, and I convinced myself that was the same as moving forward. It isn't. I know that now." Sophia was quiet. "Mateo," Jay continued, "reminds me that life doesn't pause to let you finish grieving. It just keeps going. And you either go with it, or you stay behind." He finally looked at her. "You didn't have the luxury of staying behind. You had to keep going whether you were ready or not." "Neither did you," she said softly. "You just had more control over what keeping going looked like." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about something." "Tell me." "I'd like this to be more than what it is right now. Whatever we've been doing these past months, I'd like it to be something we name." Sophia stopped walking. He stopped too, turning to face her on the sidewalk with the Friday evening city moving around them. She thought about the kitchen floor at 2 a.m., the dying candle, the empty formula canister. She thought about a text sent to the wrong number by hands that were shaking too hard to check the details. She thought about 4 words. Is the baby okay? She thought about everything that had happened between that moment and this one. The yellow blanket, the cafe with mismatched chairs, the folder of evidence, Seo Yeon's name spoken in a quiet voice over the phone, a year of survival dissolving into something that felt, for the first time, like actually living. I'd like that too, she said. He exhaled, a small sound barely audible, but she caught it. The specific exhale of someone who has been holding something carefully for a long time and has finally, carefully, set it down. 3 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Sophia Reyes walked into the Lim Biocore building carrying Mateo on her hip and a coffee in her free hand. The security guard, Mr. Torres, who had learned Mateo's name in the first week and took this responsibility very seriously, gave him a solemn nod of greeting. Mateo responded with a sound that was approximately a word but open to interpretation. Sophia's new office, she'd been promoted to Director of Research Compliance 2 weeks ago, a role she'd helped design, had a window that caught the morning light and a small framed photo on the desk. Mateo, at 4 months, in the yellow blanket, laughing at something off camera with his whole body. She set him down on the activity mat in the corner, opened her laptop, and started her day. At 9 a.m., Jay appeared in her doorway with his own coffee, a morning habit that had become so established that Ava, his assistant, had started scheduling the first 30 minutes of his day as unavailable without anyone asking her to. Board meeting got moved to Thursday, he said. I saw. Works better for the compliance presentation anyway. He came in and crouched down to Mateo's level. Mateo, who had by this point developed a comprehensive and enthusiastic relationship with Jay that involved being thrown gently into the air, demanding to examine the contents of Jay's pockets, and occasionally falling asleep on his shoulder during late evening office hours, immediately offered him a plastic ring with the solemnity of a formal gift. Jay accepted it with matching solemnity. He's going to run this company someday, Jay said. Over my dead body, Sophia replied, without looking up from her screen. He's going to run his own, Jay laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that reached his eyes. She had cataloged every version of this laugh over the past months and still wasn't tired of them. On a Sunday in early spring, they drove to the coast. It wasn't planned. Jay had appeared at her door at 7 a.m. with coffee and the expression of someone who had been awake early making a decision and said, "Do you want to get out of the city?" She had looked at him, then at Mateo, who was in his pajamas eating banana pieces with great concentration. "Give me 20 minutes, she said. They drove with the windows down. Mateo asleep in his car seat by the time they hit the highway. Sophia's playlist cycling through songs she'd loved before everything changed and was slowly loving again. Jay drove with one hand on the wheel and the ease of someone for whom driving was a form of thinking. At the coast, they found a stretch of beach that was cold and empty in the way that early spring beaches are. The best kind, Sophia had always thought, the kind that belonged to whoever showed up. Jay carried Mateo, who was awake now and deeply interested in the concept of sand. Sophia walked beside them and felt the specific quality of the moment, the way certain ordinary hours carry the weight of everything that led to them, visible only in retrospect. This is what was on the other side, she thought. This is what was waiting. She had spent so long in survival mode that she'd forgotten forward was a direction she was allowed to move in, forgotten that the story wasn't over just because the chapter was hard. A wrong number. A stranger who answered. A yellow blanket. A second chance that arrived as an accident and turned into something neither of them had planned for, but both of them, she thought, had needed. She reached over and took Jay's free hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Mateo, for his part, grabbed a fistful of sand and looked at it with the expression of someone who has discovered something extraordinary, which, Sophia thought, watching him, was exactly right. Some stories begin with grand gestures and careful plans, and some begin with a wrong number at 2 a.m. and a stranger who, for reasons they can't fully explain, chooses to answer. If Sophia had checked the contact name one more time, if her hands hadn't been shaking, if the candle hadn't been so low, none of this would have happened. But she didn't check, and he answered, and the rest, as they say, is everything. If Sophia and Jay's story moved you, hit like right now, it genuinely helps more people find their way to stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if a stranger texted you at 2 a.m. asking for help? Would you have answered? Subscribe and stay close, because Jay's story before Sophia, the years that built the man who answered a stranger's text at midnight, that story is coming, and it starts somewhere much darker than a 2 a.m. kitchen floor.